Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to my channel. It is February 10th, 2023. It is Friday night, and I have three topics on the agenda that I would like to discuss with you all. One is the Satanic Grammy Awards that we saw over this past weekend. Two is Biden's State of the Union address, and three is Trump's rather serious accusation against Ron DeSanctimonious. Let's hop in. Okay, so the Grammys took place Saturday or Sunday, I'm not sure which day, but it was rather interesting, to say the least. So Sam Smith and Kim Petras, I'm not sure what her name is exactly, they won an award for best something, right? And they proceeded to do a performance in which they acted like they were basically dressed like Satan, okay? And it was interesting. I don't know. There's only so many words I can drag out of my vocabulary to describe what this type of performance was. Now, listen, okay? They have every right to go up on stage and act however they want, okay? They can worship Satan. They can dress in a Satan costume. They could do this little dance, whatever they want. But I'm just going to say this. I think it speaks volume that in 1984 we had 50 million viewers. Now in 2023, we only have 9 million viewers. So I think that should speak volume to which way the culture is going in America. Okay, now listen, I'm not calling Sam Smith and all these other people Satanists, all right? I don't want to say that, but I don't think it's our country is going the right way with that type of attitude, saying, "Oh, we worship Satan, we're gonna dress as the devil." It's one thing if you're rebelling against Christians. It's another thing if you're totally just acting like Satan on stage. I mean, it's rather silly. I mean, I almost find it cringeworthy. That's just my opinion, but I think the ratings speak for themselves, okay? I'm not calling Sam Smith and all these other people Satan worshipers. I think it's just a funny little joke. It's a performance. It's not meant to be taken seriously. That's what I stand on it. But personally, I don't like the way in which our culture is going here in the 21st century. It's been, in my opinion, slowly getting worse and worse. But you know what? Maybe we're in one of those awkward stages in which we are sort of fawning over Satanism or fawning over all these other things, and it's just something that maybe maybe it'll get better. Maybe it's just making fun of religious people. I'm not sure exactly, but overall, I don't have a principled stance on it. I just thought it was rather strange and awkward considering that these folks are embracing full on Satanism. I'm not sure that's entirely appropriate, especially for the young children that are watching. I don't want them to look up in that and then suddenly start worshiping Satan, dressing up as Satan. All right, I won't make a big deal out of that. Anyway, that's sort of the more culture war attitude that I'm bringing to the table here. That's not really as relevant as perhaps Joe Biden's State of the Union address. Now, listen, there's a good, there's a bad, and there's an ugly to Joe Biden's State of the Union address, okay? I'll start with the good. I'll be honest, I was actually proud of him. I watched it last Tuesday, and he did not do a lot of stuttering. He stood up there and he gave a speech on what his plan was, on what his accomplishments were, which, I mean, some of them I don't see as exact accomplishments, but some of his plans I agree with, some of them I disagreed with, and the fact that he was there for almost an hour and a half and didn't stutter, didn't fall asleep. How many 80-year-old men do you know that could give a speech like that? I mean, he might be jacked up to levels of insanity, but you know what? He stood up there, he gave a speech, and I'm proud of him. I'm proud of our president. As much as I don't want to say despise him, but might disagree with him politically, I think he did a very good job up there. And one of the great things I saw, in fact, I thought this was the best moment of the night. He was accusing Republicans of cutting Social Security and Medicare, and they were booing him. You had Marjorie Taylor Greene, you had a lot of other Republicans that were like, "Oh, that's outrageous." And honestly, it made me proud. And then he's like, "Okay, we're not going to cut Social Security." And I was like, "Thank God," because one of the things I agree with, like I'm a more fiscally conservative person. Like I don't like in my view, I don't want to spend too much. I don't like that much government interference. But when it comes to Social Security and Medicare, these are two very important things. Like I think this is my personal view. I think you have a right to Social Security and I think you have a right to Medicare. I don't think it's a privilege. I think it's a right. And quite frankly, it's a safety issue. So for Republicans to start booing our president and shouting and then to say, "Oh, we're not gonna cut Social Security and Medicare," I thought that was the best moment of the night. I'm like, "Thank God they're not cutting Social Security, they're not cutting Medicare. This is awesome." So that's that. That was the good parts of last night. Also, I think Biden, when it comes to his healthcare plan, I think his carrying on of Obamacare, I'm actually in great favor of Obamacare because my principled stance is that a lot of people deserve a right to health care. The individual mandate I thought was very good. You have a right to choose on what your health care coverage is. Yes, of course, there are negative aspects to Obamacare as well, but he did provide a ton of poor Americans. In fact, I think it was 50 plus million Americans who didn't have great health care. He provided them with health care. And of course, if you're going to provide health care with the American people, I think sort of your baseline level of people that you want to appeal to is the poor, because guess what? The poor are going to be most affected by Medicare. I mean, you need to provide them with sort of a baseline level of a right to have health. And I thought Obamacare was better than not. And I appreciate our president for staying the course with that because, as you know, President Trump never came up with a comprehensive healthcare plan despite him criticizing it for year in and year out. So that's the good. The bad was Joe Biden just going on and on and on about all his spending plans. The Green New Deal, this, that, the other thing. It's like, listen, dude, we only have a finite amount of money. You can't keep spending and spending and spending. Listen, this is the type of thing that is going to drive up inflation. And listen, I'm not saying inflation is Biden's fault. He wasn't exactly put in a great situation. Putin declared war on Ukraine, and that has driven up energy prices. We have just come out of a deep recession due to COVID. And, Biden wasn't handled a great situation. And I don't think he's handled it great, honestly, because he just keeps spending and spending and spending. I mean, other than the stimulus checks, I think a lot of his spending plans, like, for example, the Green New Deal, it's like you're trying to pay for all these alternative energy programs. For example, I don't believe climate change is like an existential crisis. Like right here and now, we have a war that is taking place in Russia, and Joe Biden cutting the Access pipeline, the South Dakota pipeline, and then taking or buying money from Russia that is directly benefiting their war efforts. And that leads me to my second qualm with sort of the speech. He barely covered China. I mean, China is catching up to us when it comes to economy, when it comes to intelligence. I mean, he took almost a week to shoot down the spy balloon. He took almost a week for that. He didn't cover that at all. I mean, instead he was talking about like insurance fees, this and that. He barely covered China. Listen, we need a president in the White House who is strong on foreign policy. I think a president should do whatever it takes. I think a president should do whatever it takes in order to keep us safe. Obama, for example, Biden, of course, was the vice president. He said, "We draw the line here. But if Biden tries to take Crimea, guess what? He took Crimea, and President Obama, as much as I love him, he did not do much about it, and Biden was the vice president. He has a very weak record on foreign policy. And Biden, a couple of years ago, he left Afghanistan, which actually I agree with. I agree we should have pulled out of Afghanistan. But the way we did it, a top executive warning our president that we shouldn't have left Afghanistan, and the way that we did, it's like they were ill prepared for it. And we left 13 American service members behind. and we left God knows how many nuclear weapons, and we left literally a kill list to the Taliban, and our president didn't even know about it. Showing that type of weakness on the world scale is just outrageous. And I was at the time I was very widely critical of Biden about it, and I still am. I think that's outrageous. And not to mention that, I'll circle back to it. Our economic plans for this Green New Deal stuff. It's like, listen, we got a war in Russia right now. We can't be focusing on this. It's like we have inflation right now. We cannot be spending too much. We need to focus on spending less, negotiating a deal with Republicans on the debt ceiling, and then coming up with a plan in which we can actually fight back against Russia, who is literally receiving money from us through us buying oil to fund their war efforts. I mean, you cannot buy anything from Russia right now. They are attacking some of our allies, Ukraine, who, by the way, I would love it if they joined NATO. And NATO, of course, had defended us. They defended us during 9/11. I just it's ridiculous. We need a stronger president on foreign policy. So that's my stance on Biden's State of the Union. Overall, I thought it was average. I'm not really a big fan of the State of the Union. The president just bringing a bunch of people in. Ronald Reagan sort of rejuvenized it. He brought a lot of people in. He's like, "Oh, this person's great. This person's great." And I'm not a fan of the State of the Union. But you know what? Biden's approval rating did go up, and I think that matters a lot because he did have an impact on Americans. And quite frankly, I may not be the biggest fan of him, but I wish him best going the next year and a half for his presidency. As crazy as it seems, he's going to run again. This man is 80 years old, and guess what? If he gets elected again, he's going to be 81, 82 years old. He was older than Ronald Reagan when Reagan left office than when Joe Biden took office. And guess what? Back then, people were saying Ronald Reagan was too old. Joe Biden was 77, almost 78 when he got elected. Guess what? When he leaves the White House, if, God forbid, he gets elected to a second term, he's going to be 86 years old. That is very old. That is well past the death age. Anyway, that leads me to my third story, which is our former president, Ron DeSantis, or DeSanctimonious, as Trump says. Trump accused him of, I guess, grooming young women. If I'm not mistaken, Ron DeSantis was a high school teacher in the early 2000s when he was in his mid to early 20s. He was only a little over my age at the time, and he's seen with a group of women, and Trump is accusing him of grooming women. And can I just say, I could not be less shocked by this. To follow up by that, I want to say I absolutely love the fact that Trump is going after DeSantis, okay? And as somebody who is a fan of DeSantis, both my grandparents live in Florida and they love DeSantis, and that has a little bit of influence on me. So I sort of have a bias to DeSantis. I was really excited when he got reelected as governor back in November. But Trump going after him, it's just he's creating memes for himself, and he's almost making a fool of himself. And you want to know why? Because Ron DeSantis is not even acknowledging him. That is the weakness of Trump, because you see all these. If you remember back in the 2016 Republican campaign where everybody was just ripping on Trump. Oh, this, that, Trump says that, we need this, we need that, and they all just tumble like a house of cards. And Trump got nominated as the Republican nominee. And he feeds off of attention. When the media, when this person, with this person, guess what? Trump, whenever he feels the threat of someone, whenever he feels somebody's breath like right on his back, when somebody's like right on his ass, he will attack them. And it makes a lot tougher for that person to fight back. Ron DeSantis is not even acknowledging him. He's not acknowledging him at all. And that's more power to him, because it's kind of like a child that's going after somebody. And the adult is like, oh, well, you're going to deal with criticism, this, and that. So Ron DeSantis is playing the game perfectly, because the way to defeat Trump is pretend like he's not even there. Don't even acknowledge him. Anyway, that's all I have to say for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please feel free to share. Make sure to like this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you later. God bless.